Hi, my name is Rahul Iyer. Welcome to today's episode of Real Life Anecdotes. This episode is titled The Wrath of Swine Flu Saved by a Boxplot. A boxplot is a simple graphical tool that helps you understand the variation in your dataset. In this real life anecdote, you will see how swine flu had created a terrible situation for a business process. However, a boxplot came in so handy that it nullified the situation created by swine flu and literally saved this business millions of dollars that they would have paid as penalty. It also saved the reputation of this business and earned the trust from the clients that irrespective of whatever the situation, the process will continue to deliver on its goals and objectives. Let's begin with this real life anecdote. This is the situation that took place way back in 2008. I was working as a Six Sigma consultant for the energy and utilities business of our organization. Our client was one of the major gas light resources organization in the US. They provided gas connections to their customers in Southern America. They had outsourced the call center business to my organization in India. The call center received calls from end customers to start or stop their gas connections for bill maintenance and general queries. And this business was running smooth for more than 3 years. I will need to explain the business model before I get into further details of this anecdote. The model of energies and utilities business is somewhat different than other businesses. The business model is seasonal as its business fluctuates based on the different seasons in a year. For example, for the first 6 months of the year during summers, their customers do not require a gas connection. So, there are less calls received by the call center. During this period, the call center has skeletal staffing. However, during winters, the customers are required to switch their gas connections on to keep their house warm and the call center is flooded with calls. During winters, we were required to bump our staff presence by almost 4 times. So we had about 100 full-time employees taking calls. The winter season was now approaching in the next 2 to 3 months. To prepare for the increased call volume during winters, the operations team needed to hire 300 additional employees. So the manager of the process raised a requisition of hiring 300 people, sought all the approvals and sent the request to the human resources team to start hiring. Generally, HR would start sending candidates for interview within 10 days of getting the requisition. However, this time the operations team hardly received any candidates. They waited for about 15 to 20 days and followed up with HR. The HR team said they were trying to get the required candidates and asked the operations team to wait. After waiting for about 1 to 1.5 months and following up multiple times, the operations team lost their cool and escalated to the bosses of the HR department. As the HR team received this escalation, they responded that they were not able to get candidates because of the outbreak of swine flu. Remember, in 2008, there was a major outbreak of swine flu across the globe, and India was amongst the worst hit countries by this epidemic. Because of this, there was not a single soul walking into the company premises for any interview. This was an uncontrollable situation for HR. The operations team became furious. The team had a target of 80% calls to be picked up within 60 seconds. And if this target was not met, the team would pay a penalty of about 1% of the overall billing. Needless to say that the penalty amount ran into millions considering the scale of operations. A big fight erupted between the operations and the HR teams. The operations team knew that they won't meet the goal and would have to pay the penalty. So, someone has to take the blame, right? They pushed all the blame to the HR and the HR team pushed back. I was working as a Six Sigma consultant for this business process. I was not directly involved in this fight, but my organization was smart. They had linked 30% of my salary, the variable pay, to the performance of the business process. So if the process was green, I would get my full salary, But if the process matrix became red, which was obvious in this case, I would receive a pay cut. And I always loved my salary. So I had to do something about the situation. I extracted reports of the average handle time data from a tool called the Avaya CMS Supervisor and created box plots of the average handle time for each of the members in various teams. The box plots looked like this. Their average handle time target was 400 seconds. Everything seemed to be fine on this chart. There were a few outliers and a few team members were around the target mark. However, as I looked into these graphs with a keen eye for detail, I found something fishy. There were a few team members in each of these teams who had an unusually low average handle time with the least variation. As you would observe, their AHT was less than half of the target, and they were absolutely consistent. How could they be so exceptional where others are barely meeting the 400 seconds mark? So I took a note of their names and decided to investigate further. I walked up to the quality auditor of the process and told him that I needed to listen to the calls of these team members. He gave me a weird look, as Six Sigma executives generally did not get into listening to any calls by themselves. He asked me to sit and started playing their calls. So, I was able to hear the recorded conversation between the customer and the call center agent. I was also able to see the recorded screen of that agent simultaneously. The first 2 or 3 calls were fine. Nothing exceptional was observed. Then I asked the quality auditor to arrange the calls in ascending order of time and make me listen to those calls that were less than 200 seconds. He followed the instructions, and now I was listening to these specific calls with lesser AHT. I observed that the call landed on the agent's soft phone. Agent greeted the customer and asked how he or she could help. The customer shared the query and the agent followed up with some verification questions. While all of this was happening, in about a few seconds, the call suddenly disappeared from the soft phone. The agents were advised never to release any customer calls, and if they have to release a call, they have to use the soft phone so that the release of the call gets recorded on the auditing screen. They were never supposed to touch the physical phone kept at their desk. This phenomenon of sudden disappearance of the calls happened multiple times. I literally audited the calls of all the names that I had identified in the Boxplot analysis. I thought the calls may be getting dropped automatically. So I checked if there were any complaints raised for call drops. The log files for call drop complaints were up to date and did not show any such complaint for last 3 or 4 months. Now what to do? I knew that Avaya had a report called as the Itchy report that tracked every button hit on the physical phone. So I called up Avaya and requested them to send the Itchy report for my business process. In about 2 hours, I received the report in my mailbox. And the suspense of the sudden call drops was over. The report showed that these specific people hit the release button of the physical phone after about 150 to 200 seconds. What could be the reason behind that? 1. Disconnecting the phone in time kept their AHT under control. 2. When the customer was disconnected, he used to call back. If the customer met the same or another agent who disconnected him again, the customer called back again and in frustration would ask to speak to the supervisor. The supervisor's desk was based in the US and there were a handful of client employees who took these supervisory calls. Because there were just a handful of them, reaching them used to take anywhere between 30 minutes to 2 hours. So agents were not allowed to directly transfer the customer to the supervisors, but to wait with the customer until the supervisor arrived. And this wait time was not tracked in their AHT performance. So these agents could literally be off the grid not taking calls and sitting idle until they transferred the call to the supervisor. Less work for them, right? But they did not know that I was playing the role of an FBI agent and analyzing their AHT data. My next logical question was, why did the team leads of these agents not know that they were releasing calls? To investigate that, I walked up to one of the team leads. Without giving any background information, I generally had a small talk. During this small talk, I asked the team lead about that particular team member. The first team lead said, "Oh, that person. That person is amazing. He takes such good calls and his AHT rocks." Then I approached another supervisor. His response was the same. I approached another one and another one. One of the team leads surprised me with her response. She said that this team member was so good, he always bought her sweets. Oh my God. This process was in doldrums. I now had a complete picture and all the evidence. I decided to escalate the issue. I looked for the process manager but realized that he was on a week-long vacation. I then looked for the service delivery leader. He was in Philippines managing another client business. I then looked for the general manager, and to my good luck, he was in his office. I walked up to him and asked if he had a few minutes to talk. He said yes, and I started sharing my thoughts. I told him, "Well, I have been doing some investigation lately in your process. I know we have a target to hire 300 more candidates, without which we may not be able to meet the client target. But I have done the math. With 104 existing people, you can still meet the goal. However, there is a problem. Your process is green from outside, but hollow from inside. Your team leads behave as if they are the gods and kings of this process, and they don't know that there are rampant integrity issues happening under their nose. A small bunch of employees are releasing calls regularly. This initiates a vicious circle where the customer calls back and asks for a supervisor and the employee gets off the grid. We have one less person to take calls and we have the same customer calling back again and again. If this issue is resolved, my math says we will be able to meet the goal. We may not be able to overachieve, but at least we meet it." Listening to this, the general manager became totally furious. He was not furious on me, but on the entire governance his direct reports had set in the process. He asked me to send the employee list to him and he would take care of this issue with immediate effect. There were about 15 to 18 people in my list, and I thought, why to play with the careers of all of them? So I sent him only 3 names. He immediately called the HR on the floor and terminated those 3 employees. There was pin drop silence on the entire shop floor. He had set an example. The story didn't end there. Well, the quality auditor and I were standing at the entrance of the floor and generally chatting. During that moment, one employee just walked by us. He said hi to Val and left. Val looked at me and asked if this employee's name was on my list. In reality, he was also on my list, but I had not given additional names. I did not respond to Val, just gave him a confused but plain smile. Val asked the quality auditor to check if this person's calls were also getting disconnected. In about 15 minutes, the quality auditor came and confirmed that he was also the culprit. This was the 4th termination on the floor. In awe, I asked Val how he recognized this person without even listening to his calls. To that, he mentioned that this employee was roaming on the shop floor in floaters, whereas the policy was that all employees come to office in shoes. Val said if this guy did not care about wearing shoes, he would care 2 hoods about following other policies and procedures on my shop floor. Man, this was awesome. In the next 3 days, this general manager worked like an operations manager on the shop floor and turned the entire situation completely. That season, we were able to hire only 3 additional staff, and our process was still able to meet the client target. The client was so delighted that they offered a bonus to the operations team for managing the business so well with such limited staff. And yes, I received a full salary without any variable pay deduction. So, that's the end of the story. A small graphical tool, such as a Boxplot, made such a huge difference to this business process and positively changed the business outcome. I hope you have liked this real life anecdote. As a special gift, I am providing you a downloadable file of the box plots that I shared in this story. I hope you will love it. Please do share your comments and thoughts down below. And do not forget to like, share, and subscribe this channel to stay up to date on my latest episodes and videos.